Welcome back to the Change Matters Virtual Summit. My name is Margit Takacs. I'm a change management consultant and the author of the award-winning book Change Matters. I'm delighted to welcome today Minola Jac. Minola, a fellow author and change expert, brings in a lot of strong, thoughtful perspective when it comes to leadership, people, organizational transformation. She's been an excellent sparring partner to me, and I'm so glad that in a world where leaders are constantly expected to answer difficult questions, many of them, and often handle the elephant in the room, I can have Minola here as a guest to today's virtual summit. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so very much, Margit. It is a joy, it is a privilege to be here. And the funny thing is that whenever I'm introduced, and people do try their best, and then they're stuck with me. And I just want to share that, you can call me by many titles, but my best friends, they call me Master of Disaster. And I think that is so much more appropriate. But thank you for having me.
Miss Master of Disaster, I think today's topic fits perfectly to your personality and making sense of the chaos, the disaster around, because having worked at Syngenta for a long time as a change practitioner, an expert in-house, you've seen and worked with many leaders that have faced these challenging dilemma of how to name the elephant in the room, something unspoken that consciously or subconsciously blocks them. But the way they can lead any change, it's fundamentally influenced. What do you think holds them back from naming what's happening?
Well, the first thing, I would not necessarily go straight to the elephant in the room. And just a disclaimer, I don't know why we pick on elephant in the business world so much. I think they're a wonderful creature. But I would also look a little bit at who else is in the room beside the elephant, because I think that also influences how leaders perceive the elephant and how open they are to actually name the elephant in the room. So, do we have peers alongside leaders? Do we have maybe people who are a little bit higher up than the leaders who are expected to name the elephant? I think there it's also a little bit of, just like any other human being on this earth, you think about your own relevance and you think about your own safety and security, and to a certain degree you think about your own organizational political capital when we talk about leaders. It's also very interesting to look at whether they have people from within their teams or they have people from below them in the organization. And I think that's also a little bit of, how when we talk about psychological safety, we think of, well, it's speaking up. And I have a friend, and he's been researching psychological safety for many years. And we had a chat a couple of years back, and he said something that stayed with me. He said, speaking up, I believe it's just half of the psychological safety we need to talk about. The other half is about the psychological safety of listening down. So I oftentimes think when I see leaders holding back from naming the elephant or addressing the elephant in the room, do they feel psychological safety to listen down? Yeah. Do they feel comfortable enough to appear unimpressive? Because let's be honest, we are still in that inertia of the heroic leader, right? Who has the answers to everything, who has solutions to everything. And sometimes I think naming the elephant in the room does require from a leader for them to feel safe enough to address it, and safe enough to probably change their opinion on something without being accused of having, decision and opinion flip-flop syndrome. So I would first and foremost look around the room. who do they need to appear in front of addressing that elephant? And at the end of the day, we need to hold ourselves honest to knowing that leaders are humans like us, and the pressure that they sometimes perceive themselves to be under can play tricks on their sense of relevance and legacy, and a lot of expectations from them.
If the audience has people who are similarly change practitioners like yourself in an organization, and they catch a very important leader not feeling that psychological safety, you mentioned also the sense of relevance and the importance of managing the organizational politics. What would you suggest them to help those specific leaders through these hurdles so they name what might be blocking a team from embracing the change?
I don't know how it works for other people. I know that building trust is also profoundly individual, and we all go about it, in different ways. But for example, most probably because of my background as a journalist, I think asking questions in a way that doesn't sound like an interrogation helps. So maybe formulating questions as invitations, or just, sheer spaces of curiosity and inquiry, like, tell me more, or can you walk me through, the picture you have in your mind? And trying to the best of your ability to create a space with no judgment. So they really feel that that's, more a space to connect than an oral exam, if that makes sense. Um, Maybe the call out there is that this might not happen with one conversation, and this might not happen in the same conversation. So how you build the relationship maybe before you go into the room where you need to name the elephant, that is fundamental.
So what I hear from you is the advice is definitely be curious, ask questions, and take the time to go back to those specific leaders or basically any key stakeholders at any levels of the organization. Because if you have that trusting relationship, then you can have the tough discussions with them too. I often hear that it's really important to for leaders to use strong data, for them to use business arguments with facts and figures. Based on your experience, how can leaders balance the two? The ability to use facts, figures, but also look at the human perspective.
Well, this definitely will feel like an ode to the elephants. This whole conversation, because there is a model that was developed especially to communicate for purposes of change or during times of change, and the original model is called the rider elephant path. Right, a different kind of elephant. And just as a side note, people might have heard about it as the head, heart, hands, how Google rebranded it. But my personal favorite is the original rider elephant path. And it says that in order for us as humans to be inspired to trust a change process, we need three types of information. We need something to give to the rider, and this is our rational part, right? This is our data processing, business, business case, the SWOT analysis and everything. Then we need something for the elephant, and the elephant is our emotional part. And one thing that I try to tell people is that when we say the emotional part, it's not just about feelings and emotions and, holding hands, but this is that dimension where we think about our safety, our security, our relevance, our future, right? And then the path stands for our need for practical information. So, how will this come to be? The reason why I like the rider-elephant path is because it's very visually striking, the difference in both size and agility between the rider and the elephant, right? One very, very quick way to touch people in their elephant dimension is storytelling. And what I mean by storytelling is share something that is authentic, even sometimes vulnerable, right? But you don't need 39 slides for that. Maybe you need 2 minutes. Yeah.
It's a bit like using these rider elephant path as a checklist. Have I talked to the rational mind? Have I talked to the
Exactly.
emotional heart? And do I have something practical for people to relate
Exactly.
to do and remember to act upon? That's a very nice analogy for people to remember. Thank you for sharing.
Mhm.
Um, Close to the end of our virtual summit, I was wondering if you have one piece of advice for the listeners, leaders and practitioners who need to lead difficult and often emotionally charged conversations without defensiveness and disengagement. What would your advice be to them?
Mm. I think the best piece of advice is something that I learned years ago from one of my mentors, and I will just, pay it forward. And it's very simple. It's be present over perfect.
Mm.
And simply be in the conversation. And when I say be in the conversation, is, from the very basic, put your phone aside, close your laptop, be there for the person in front of you. But also, another thing that I learned a little bit more recently, we're taught that ROI stands for return on investment. And someone told me, well, how about we think that for the purpose of interacting with another human, ROI stands for return on intention. What is your intention when you go into that interaction? How do you want to show up? So, part of being present is also understanding how you go into that conversation. What is your state of mind? What is your intention? What are your triggers? Yeah, a little bit of being present in yourself before you are present with someone else. And last but not least, really try to listen to understand and not to reply. I think we think that reply is something that we verbalize once the other person stops talking. But if while the other person is still talking, we think about what to say or we think about the solution, we listened less from that moment on. So that's my best advice: be present over perfect. And something that those who know me well know I say all the time: be curious, not furious. So particularly when you feel that someone might have pushed a button, um, if nothing else, just say, tell me more, or try to clarify what they meant. Especially important if, for example, it's a conversation in English and English is neither party's mother tongue. Yeah.
That's another dimension for us to consider. Thank you so much for sharing all these insights with us, Minola. This month, we're focusing on having high-stake conversations with our key stakeholders in the midst of changes. And I heard quite a few golden nuggets. Just to name a few from you, is the importance of being curious, asking questions with intention, remembering the ROI and the new definition, and also maybe visually to remind ourselves the importance of having the rider, elephant, and the path in communicating the change ahead, because with that, if we are present, we can definitely be having difficult and important pivotal discussions with our key people. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I look forward to continuing our discussions.
Thank you very, very much.